Let's go on and move on to Bel-Air. People don't
Now,
know
this is a story.
what Bel-Air is about. It's about a kid that grew up in West Philadelphia. He was born and raised there. And he was on a playground, you know, maxing up. Well, actually, he was actually at the playground when he shouldn't have been at the playground. But, you know, he was maxing out, shooting some, you know, hoops. And then, look, it was a couple of guys. They were up to no good. And they started making trouble in his neighborhood. And he got in one little arrest. And his mom got scared because they was messing with them D-boys. And so his mom said, look, I'm moving you with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air. And when he went to the club, it did have Dice in the license plate. Dice in the window. And the guy's driver, his name was Jazz. And let's jump into the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reimagined reboot called Bel-Air. I'm going to jump right up into this one, man. I love this show. It's only 4 episodes deep, and I'm in love. I never thought I don't think I've experienced something where it can have the vibe of the OG version of it, but it'd be a completely different version of it altogether. So the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, if everybody doesn't know, it was a sitcom. It was a comedy, kind of comedy, dramedy, but it was more of a comedy.
Time out,
anything.
Jason.
Okay.
Time out. If you don't know the
All
Fresh
right.
Prince of Bel-Air, you shouldn't be watching this fucking show.
Hey, look here. Yeah, we are blacker than black, y'all. So yeah, that's true.
I don't know how you missed that one. Know. Maybe you're a child. Okay.
If you missed it, it's on HBO Max. Catch up. Pause
right, go on, Jason.
Catch up. All right, but anyway, so it's a comedy. It's a sitcom comedy dramedy. This is more just dramedy, just more of a drama that has some comedic elements in it, but it's not comedy as in the goofiness of like Will Smith, the real life human being. But anyway, they took it as if, what if this was real life? The trouble that he got in was life-threatening, and you had to move your kid because of possibility of death, which is a real reality for a lot of people. And luckily enough, that Will just happened to have a rich uncle and uncle, and he goes to Bel-Air. What makes this show so great, because all the little things that the Fresh Prince tackled very well is magnified here, but it's also magnified and updated for our era. And that's what I thought was very impressive. So that fish out of water culture clash between Will and his cousin Carlton, it's updated here, but it's put up to a high level. It's one part in one of the episodes where it's a white dude dropping an M-bomb. And Carlton right up in the mix dancing with it, and Will get it, and Will is not having it. And it's like, I never thought about that with Carlton being in that situation, because the comedic version of the show probably would have never touched something like that. But this one hit it, and it's like, yeah, I can see a black dude being in a school with nothing with white folks, and a white dude repeating the N-word because he was repeating a song. Like the white dude just wasn't using it. He was singing a song, but it had the N-word, and he was saying the word. That a black kid that grew up predominantly around with nothing but white folks would probably feel okay with that, because if he did say something, him being ostracized like that would, like, he don't want to go through that smoke. We don't give a damn because we from it ain't acceptable, and most people in black culture don't feel like it's acceptable. But that never even thought into my mind when it happened. And even at that point, I was still on Will's side, but I could definitely see Carlton's point of it. And it may, but that's just a background. But I felt like all the characters in here, they just cut out the goofiness from them from the original show and kept what the essence of the character was. I do think Carlton's character is a little more extreme than I would want him to be, because we got a vision eventually they're going to get to a point where they're going to be cool and friends and buddies, because that's where the other show went. So I assume they're going to get there eventually. For how extreme Carlton is right now, I can't foresee a future where I ever will be cool with this dude after all the stuff he's done and said and acted like. But okay, if you want to go there, that's dope. Look, the guy who's playing Will Smith or the Fresh Prince, dude's good, man. He's really good, because the first episode I was hating this kid. I'm like, bruh,
a little goofy.
You about to get popped out here. You all here worried about the wrong things. I'm yelling at the screen. Like, I'm like the black guy in the movie theater. Like, well, hey, me and my wife are watching it. My white wife, and she's just looking at me because she probably never seen me this up in arms about something. Like, but then he becomes like the Fresh Prince. He's lovable. He's charismatic. He's stylish. He got that swag with him, and that charisma just pours out of him. And it's something that I'm like, man, like, I had to check myself. Is it just because how much I love this character? that I'm kind of affording him this amount of charisma or this amount of buy-in, or is it because of the performance? And my wife watched Fresh Prince, but she didn't watch it like maybe me and you did. But she was like that, so it was the buy-in. I love the update. The two characters I think that got the best updates, I think, one was Hillary. I think Hillary gets the best update because they took away the ditzy goofiness. Yeah. Oh, 100%. And she's fine as hell. But they got away the ditzy goofiness and they played it to the self-absorbed, kind of conceited hustler that Hillary was later on in the show. So I did enjoy that, and they made her a social media kind of beholden to that. Yeah, which is something that I feel like Hillary Banks in the modern era would be versus being self-absorbed about her style and look with her friends. So her whole internet's her friend group. The second one I think that did the best alteration is Jazz, man. Like, Jazz was a gag character in the original Fresh Prince. This one, Jazz is the man. Jazz is literally, I feel like, Fresh Prince, like Will Smith's foot in the bougie, but the foot in the streets. Like, Jazz is the one that keeps him balanced. Like, whenever he hits the fan, they find a way for him to contact Jazz or get with Jazz or see Jazz, and Jazz gives him some words of wisdom that kind of play by. You know, I wonder if they're ever going to play the gag of him ever getting thrown out. I hope they don't.
Really
this Jazz is so cool. Because, this Jazz is so cool. I hope they never have to do that gag. But, Jazz is the biggest glow up here. But it's little things in here that I enjoy, like Uncle Phil listening to Tribe Called Quest. Now, James Avery, the guy who played Uncle Phil in the original series, he was a huge jazz fan. And if you watch and listen to the show, he talks about that a lot, his love of jazz. He talks about when they dance to like the oldies, him and Vivian and all that stuff like that. So I like the update that he's like, Tribe. Like sounds like he's an 80s, 90s baby. You're probably like a 70s baby, but like he's into like early hip hop. And for people like that don't get it, early hip hop is just as different from new school hip hop as jazz is to old school hip hop. Like that. So they kept that kind of culture generational gap, which I thought was cool. Uncle Phil's a dope character. I think he's not James Avery. No one will ever be James Avery. But if you want to say that the characteristics of Uncle Phil, the caring father, the protector, the provider, the guy that like gave the straightforward like advice, like
the strong
figure. Yeah, the strong figure. How he does that very well. And I'm gonna let go and let Jason because I know I'm gushing so much about it. But I think the last part of this too, I did really, really enjoy is the entrance of Lisa this early and how she ties to the characters. Like Lisa was played by Nia Long in the original series, and she was Will's love interest to the point that they want to get married. Also, the fact that John almost plays her father in it, so that's another great callback to another great black actor that was in the show. And no spoiler for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Basically, he gets stood up at the altar, like she decides to marry him, and then they pretty much completely write her off the show. Like you never hear anything about Lisa ever again, which I think is a disservice.
I think it was like
to the show.
Was like the last season and a half though, so because that was like season 5.
Yeah, but now they kind of went with that whole thing when they went to college and Tyra Banks and all that stuff. Anyway, like Lisa was never heard of again though. Lisa should have had a moment to be like resolve that because she did leave her at the altar. But anyway, Lisa's in this at the very beginning. She's at Carlton and Will's school, and I think the way they play her is really, really dope, and how she fits into with the Banks family and her family, because you get a reveal at the end of the 4th episode about her father, and then how she relates to Will and Carlton. It's just really well done.
Will relates to her too because of what her father is and what he's gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just so good. Trauma, PTSD, all things in there, hood life. It's just a lot of stuff in there. And we ain't even gonna talk about Jeffrey, because Jeffrey on a whole other level of beast.
Jeffrey, you may not talk about Jeffrey. I'm gonna talk about Jeffrey.
Yeah. And okay, I keep saying the last thing. All right, my last thing on here is that the only misfire on here, and we'll see as the show goes on, is the first 4 episodes, especially the first 3. And everybody's like, what about Ashley? That's the problem. I didn't mention her because what about Ashley? She's not too prominent here. The last episode 4, they give her something to do. So I'm going to see how that fleshes out. But she doesn't do much in these early episodes, which I understand. She's a child in this adult-ass drama. Like, so I get it. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna see my time. I know I took too much time, but go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Can I reclaim my time?
yeah, please. I'm sorry. I love this show very much.
So, a little backstory about this show. A lot of people especially the non-melanated folks that I've talked to about the show have kind of turned their nose up at it because of it. Just from the if you were looking from the outside in, it seems like a cynical cash grab, you know, banking off nostalgia, right?
Mm,
But this is kind of like the farthest thing from it. This is definitely an updated take on the story that was dramatic in many parts of the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But the thing that this makes this really cool is this TV show started off as a YouTube fan made trailer by a
hmm
dude named Morgan Cooper. Right, he made this YouTube fan made trailer, and I saw this 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, and I saw it came up on my recommended timeline. And I looked at it and it said dramatic Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I'm like, who needs this? No one needs this. No one who needs this. And then I watched it and I go, I need this. And then, this it finds its way to Will Smith, who
hmm
sees this and he goes, this is awesome. He brings the kid he's not a kid. He wasn't a kid at the time. He's still not a kid. He's a young man who did this, is a producer of this show. So this guy got to come up because of the passion he had about this small little project, a fan trailer that he made. So it's not I mean, yeah, there's DNA of cynical, of course, NBC is like, oh, that's going to make us money. So they made it. But, it's got the blessing of Will Smith. It's got a young talent behind the camera doing a lot of the writing and the stuff. And it's also got some of the older writers from Fresh Prince behind it as well. So this is definitely has the original baked into its DNA to a large point that a lot of sequels or reimaginings or a lot of stuff don't. So I was already like on board for this show before starting watching it.
hmm
So, but after watching it, I just it I just like I love it. I mean, it's great. I mean, there are parts where the acting is overly dramatic and it comes to a little bit melodrama-y, but it still works. Um and the thing about this is like I can see like this is definitely a modern take on the story. They definitely like and when Fresh Prince started back in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the characters were caricatures and then they grew into characters. Like as you said, Hillary was this vapid valley girl,
hmm
who was more concerned about her wealth and money than she was about anything else. Like, and
hmm
this one, like, she definitely is not like this definitely shows like black excellence at its best. Like she is a driven young lady who wants to make something of herself. She doesn't want to rest on, and even Carlton is. They both don't want to rest on their parents. They're going to use their parents' connections or whatever to get to ahead, but they don't want to rest on their parents' money in order to achieve what they want in life, which is really really great. Um, there's also stuff with expectation. Aunt Viv is like super hard on Hillary,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
and it's because like in like I love the fact that they went with another dark skin Aunt Viv on this because she had a career and a goal that she did not necessarily fully achieve yet, and she is trying to make sure that Hillary is able to fully achieve her best things, and that is causing some friction. I love that dynamic because a lot of us, I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus or something like that. A lot of us had to deal with the expectations of our
hmm
parents growing up, and what we're supposed to be because of the things that they had to go through, when they were growing up, right?
Right, right.
Not saying that I'm one of those people, but a lot of us did.
Also, that's the only thing I didn't like of Aunt Viv. I think the old school Aunt Viv would have
So
loved
look,
like this Hillary,
yeah,
like how she's a hustler. And I know they had to
yeah.
make some friction, so I get it. That's the only thing I felt like is completely out of character. Like,
I mean, there's
but anyway,
updated tropes to this. Um,
yeah.
I, Carlton. Unlike you, I do see the foundations of them building a better relationship between him and Will. Especially in the later episodes, you can definitely see like the cracks are starting to show where Carlton is. Because let's be honest, Carlton, he's a straight up villain in this shit, but he kind of like you can kind of understand where he's coming from because he was a big fish in a little pond.
hmm
He was, he had his father's attention, his mother's attention, and now there's this who'll know the kid coming in and is cramping his vibe. Now he's not the coolest kid in the world anymore. And a lot of that coolness came because he was one of the few black kids in his school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I totally relate to that scene where the white kid was rapping, and I probably wouldn't have been dancing along, but I was that kid in that room where you're the only black kid in the room, and the good old boys are hee and ha ha, and they rapping and they saying the N word, and you got a choice to make, and you're going to see him tomorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
you might make not the greatest choice. I understand where Will came from too, because me as an older, I'd be more like Will. When I was younger, I would have been more like Carlton. And I like that duality, that play, because in the original sort of thing, they kind of made Carlton more of a gag than an actual person who grew up as the only black kid in Bel Air, right?
Right.
So, and like a lot of that
Like
stuff
the gag,
was,
like yeah, like it was like the gag was like, hey, how can we make this black guy do as much white stuff as possible? It was like the
yeah,
gag in the OG. Like he's in the
yeah,
choir, the drama club, something like it was
yeah. He
always
listens
like
to
some kind of like
he
really
listens
white
to
stuff.
fucking what's it,
Tom
Tom
Jones and
Tom
Barry
Jones and
Manilow
stuff,
and
and this
yeah,
Carlton is very much the antithesis of that. He is definitely black, even
yeah,
though
yeah,
he's
yeah,
from an
yeah.
affluent area and he's grown up in affluence. He's still very much black, and that's also very refreshing. So for such a person, he's been called Carlton a couple of times in his life. All right. Um, yeah, I there's all sorts of good things to love about this show. Uh, it's just the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, just told a different style to me.
Hmm.
Like that's it. That it's just a different style of storytelling, and it works because that story was dramatic. It just had a laugh track along with it. This story is just dramatic, but it has some laughs. Will is goofy. He's a goofy dude. He does
Hmm.
goofy shit. You know, in the show, he does goofy. He says he's smart witted. He's quick witted. He's a smart kid who says what's off the cuff, and makes a joke, and he still does that in this show, and that's great to see. And the show's great. And fucking Jeffrey, let's talk about Jeffrey. You said Hillary got the best glow up. Fucking Jeffrey got the best glow up, man. That dude is a straight hardcore gangster in this motherfucker.
Right, right, right,
This
right, right,
dude is a
right.
gang. This dude is like Will's like, what's gonna happen in Philly? And Jeffrey's like, don't even worry, don't tell your Uncle Phil. I'll handle this. Jeffrey's
Right, hold on, but I
fucking
love this. Like,
G.
just so everybody knows, because look, don't expect me seeing no ninja sweeping and mopping no damn floors or making
No,
no meals. Homeboy is a house manager, and when we say
yeah,
he managed the house, he manages the
he's
house.
no butler. They got maids to clean the house. They got Jeffrey to clean the lives. All
Right,
right.
right.
And it's cool because you also see like the relationship between Uncle Phil and Jeffrey too. And there's like,
Yep,
even though they're employee, but they're also friends. You kind
yep,
of
yep,
get
yep.
that in the original Fresh Prince, that they were friends and that he's actually a part of the family. But most of the time you get him, he's in a tuxedo, he's the butler, right? And this one, like,
Mhm.
he sits and plays pool with them. He asks him for it. Uncle Phil asks Jeffrey for advice, talking
Right,
like, how he's supposed to handle Will, how like, because Jeffrey, he says he's an immigrant. He was an immigrant from Jamaica to Britain and from Britain to the United States. So he has some of that idea of what Will's going through in coming to an environment that's completely different than what he grew up in. So he has some sort of understanding about what's Will's growing up through. He has understanding about what all the kids are going through. And
yep,
like
yep.
Jeffrey is he's the fucking coolest. Oh man, he is just so fucking awesome. Like, and don't the original Jeffrey, I love that dude. He's awesome, but this dude, he just brings it to a whole nother level of like,
Look, man, when Jeffrey was saying, when Shorty said, "Oh, Jeffrey, you look good as always," he goes, "Not as good as you," but they gave her the wink, bruh,
bruh, and this
bruh.
Jeffrey fucks. This Jeffrey
Yeah,
fucks.
exactly. Hey, I got a date with the yoga lady. What
It's
the
like,
yoga
oh, the
lady?
yoga lady.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you enjoy your day off, dear my brother.
Right.
What I
Bruh,
like
yeah,
about
look.
this show is the modernization of blackness that wasn't really apparent back in the older show. Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv definitely grew up, in segregated South, and they worked hard to get to this place, and they definitely showed a lot of like, through their actions, a lot of of their blackness through their actions, but a lot of it, like especially with Hillary and Carlton, were just kind of like jokes about, you know, black people doing white people shit, right?
Yeah.
And this one is like, no, you can grow up in those affluent areas. You can grow up in, because before the 90s, like only time you ever see black people is they're from the ghetto and that's it. And then we finally got representation with Carlton and shit, and he's not really representing anybody. And this time you get that, like, it's a different world out there for people who might have, even though they have all the advantages because of their parents and family's wealth, it may not be all that great for them too.
But also, I think
Especially,
a big thing on this is from the OG to this one is like our consciousness of our society has changed. So let's just call a bean a bean. It was 2 lanes for black shows, especially in the 90s. It was you got to be poor like Good Times, or you got to be rich like the Cosbys and the Jeffersons. It was, we didn't really see much middle class. Like you couldn't have Tim the Toolman Taylor and be black, like was the middle class family doing a thing. It was either you was up or you was down. And so when you got to the Fresh Prince, they did kind of walk the line that the Cosby Show paved. Instead of like, let's say if it was like if the Cosby Show was wrapped around Theo rather than Bill, that's pretty much just the Fresh Prince to a degree. Now I know Will's more charismatic than Theo, but that was the line. Like in our consciousness now, like we understand it's a lot more to blackness and it's not a monolith. Where back then in those 90s, what you were putting on TV was blackness is a monolith. Like either you was down or you wasn't down. That was it. Yeah. This show does a great job of being like, you can be all these things at once, all wrapped into things. Like you could be down for this cause, but kind of on the other side, like it gives that variance. And I think this is because our consciousness has changed now. You can get away with that.
Because the thing about Carlton in the show, he's still like he understands like the different struggles that black people go through because he's black. He understands that the police are going to beat his ass or whatever, but he also understands, he's in the locker room with his buddies, and, those are his friends, so maybe he'll let them slide when they say the N-word because he was the only black guy on the lacrosse team.
Right. Playing like, lacrosse. Right.
Yeah, what the fuck are you doing, dude? They don't have no football team? What the fuck? Come on, Carlton. You're wasting your talents, my brother. But like, yeah, it definitely shows that there is different types of blackness, and they're all, for the most part, valid. And that's also what's great about this show is that they're not characters anymore. They're not caricatures anymore. They're actual people with their own lives and their own inner thoughts and stuff, and that's so great to see. So great. I love this show. Fuck them.
All right.
Fuck anybody.
What are you giving it?
A 4 out of 5 because it does get hammy sometimes.
I'm right there. I think I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 as well. I think the only drawback I have from giving it a 5 is one. I got to see more with this Carlton thing, like, because that's still, I don't know. Like I said, he's damn near Lex Luthor in this fucking.
He's a fucking villain, dude.
Yeah, like again, I just got to see more from it, and maybe maybe this is the difference. Maybe they never do become good friends. They just become like tolerate each other. Maybe that's the satellite. Maybe that's what the new age is going to bring to them, where it's like,
just be like,
"Nah, we cool, but
stay away from
like, yeah, because
that's my cousin."
Yeah, like the OG Fresh Prince, they doing like they living in a pool house together, like they're tight by the end of the Fresh Prince run. But so, and I guess I'm expecting that, but because some of the stuff I'm like, man, you can't come back from this, but we'll see how that plays out.
I mean,
but
he did not plant the drugs on Will.
I agree, but he know who did, and he ain't snitch for his homeboy. And that's his cousin, his family, man.
You don't snitch. He's still about that life. What do you? There's some things that is black as a monolith, and it's like you don't snitch on your homies either.
Hey, look, no. So hold on. The black people snitching fool is okay. Yes, you don't snitch, but if you do snitch, if it's for like the help family, like
you do.
Unless the person you're gonna snitch on is like a killer,
his family,
then you gotta let the family take the L on that one. But